Welcome to Health Tech Heroes, where we talk to innovators who are rewriting the DNA of healthcare. Today, we are joined by Dr. Naomi Fried, a pioneering leader in digital health, telehealth, and healthcare innovation. Naomi brings more than 2 decades of experience spanning hospital systems, pharma, startups, and venture investment, and she is recognized as the creator of the innovation life cycle paradigm in health. As the founder and CEO of Health Innovation Strategies and now leading the PharmStars Accelerator and PharmStars Venture, Naomi's work continues to bridge the gap between pharma and digital health to accelerate the adoption of transformative solutions. We dive into her origin story, her approach to building successful innovation programs, her current ventures, and her vision for future of healthcare. Welcome to Health Tech Heroes, Naomi.
Thank you, Fasa. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
I'm so glad you could make time for Health Tech Heroes. Could you share a story from an early experience that sparked your passion for health tech innovation? This is before you even got into healthcare. What was that little spark that you recognized that put you on this path?
It was actually a pretty big spark, and my professional journey started actually as a scientist. I studied chemistry as an undergrad, and then I got a PhD in material science engineering from MIT, and then actually started working at a startup company that was in Kendall Square quite a long time ago. And we were working on portable linear accelerator technology. And I was employee number 4. I had obviously an R&D role. But when the company started talking to Boston Scientific about a business partnership, I thought, now that's kind of interesting. That's cool. And that was, I would say, the first little ember that got going. It was actually then after I moved to California for my husband's job and had the opportunity to get involved with a company that was being spun out of Stanford School of Medicine. I just tagged along with someone who was working and advising Stanford on this. And I started to see the potential for using technology to help doctors and nurses and patients. And I thought, this is really cool. I want to pivot and I want to get into the application of technology in healthcare. And that was really the beginning of my journey.
And when you got into chemistry, when you got into MIT, was there a spark before that? Was there anything that you wanted to change the world or make the world a better place? What was the mission that you had in your mind?
I've always been fascinated by new ideas and excited about the possibility of innovation and change. I think when I was studying chemistry, it was about developing new organic molecules. And I thought that was so cool. And in graduate school, it was about developing a new technology to extract titanium from its ore. So I've always been interested in new things and how they work and how you get them to work. And if you look at the arc of my career, it's one theme that's been very consistent is I love innovation. I love new ideas. I love being in the flow of ideas. And I love building new things.
Changes are sometimes, it looks like it's an adventure for you. You love it. You love new technology. You want to innovate. You want to change things. But what obstacles did you face as you transitioned from research, academia to leading innovation at large organizations? What kept you motivated through those changes? It's a dramatic change from a scientific mindset to a business mindset. What obstacles did you face?
It's a great question. I'll first start out by saying that there was opportunities both in academia and in the world of healthcare to be learning and learning all the time. And that's wonderful. Certainly when I was transitioning from science and engineering into healthcare, there was a lot for me to learn all about how healthcare works. It's a very complex and complicated industry in the US, 3-party system, patients, payers, and providers. It's very unusual. And I spent literally years learning. Even as I was doing, I was learning. So I think that was one of the big challenges was trying to become an expert, trying to understand all the nuances of the very complicated American healthcare ecosystem. I will say that the discipline of growing up in academia and learning to think and ask questions and test ideas served me very well when I wanted to build out new things and test new ideas. So I don't think it's an impossible or even that difficult a transition to go from academia into healthcare. And we see lots of people doing it. And there's great synergy and many interfaces where technology comes out of academic labs and then transitions into corporate labs and ultimately gets to the patient or the consumer. So there were certainly challenges along the way, but I think having an open mind and always wanting to learn is really important.
To be honest, you make it sound that easy. I think you have that natural talent and eagerness to change and develop. In business, everything is outside confidence intervals. So how do you make a decision?
It's a really interesting point. I know we're going to get more into PharmStars and into the venture fund that we launched, but we didn't start our venture fund until after our accelerator had been running for probably 3 or 4 years. And the reason was we weren't sure at the beginning if having a fund made sense. But once we were 3 or 4 years into it, we had the data. And my venture partner says, we're both scientists and we wanted to see the data. And after we had been running the accelerator and had 70 plus startups come through, we could see record would have been. So we had the data, and that gave us the confidence then to go out and build a venture fund. I think a lot of people just start in a venture fund with an idea and just confidence. We wanted that data. We wanted data to back us up. So I think you make a good point about how people in and out of academia and the corporate world think differently.
Looks like you're still a scientist at heart, and you're always, you can take you
Yeah,
out
you
of the
can't.
science.
You can't
You can
change
take the
that.
science out of your heart. And if there is one lesson that you want to tell me or the audience that changed everything for you once you got into this, could be a lesson where you had to make a dramatic change in your thought process or a growth area for you. If there was one incident that you would love to share with us.
You hear all the time that failures are part of innovation, and I know that now. But I really, I learned this without even realizing this is what I was learning through failing and seeing it as a learning opportunity. Very early in my career, after I had transitioned into digital health, I got involved with a company called 1747. I was initially asked to help with a business plan, and 1747 was the first company to offer virtual clinical trials. And it was such a cool idea, and I was really excited. And after the business plan, I became the managing director and was basically running the company. Company looked so promising. Fortune named us the most top biotech company in 2002, which is a long time ago, but wow, like this is obviously a company that's going somewhere. But like every startup, we needed money. And as the head of the company, I was the one that had to go out and fundraise. And this wasn't something that I had ever done before, but I rolled up my sleeves. I tried my best. I certainly knew the company, and I pitched venture capitalists and I pitched angel investors. And this was the first time I'd done it. And I probably pitched 30 or 40 people or groups over and over again in the Bay Area. But ultimately, it's a much longer story. The funding didn't come together as we had hoped, and the board decided to close the company down. So this was technically a pretty big failure. I could have felt really bad about that I couldn't keep the company together, but I really think of this failure as a tremendous learning experience. And I personally benefited from learning so much. I learned, first of all about clinical trials. I became an expert on how clinical trials are recruited for, all the costs and the pitfalls that result from brick and mortar trial sites, learnings that are still relevant today as other companies have come into the space and started to run virtual trials. I learned a ton about the world of early stage investing, including about angel rounds and venture capitalists. I'm now a VC myself. And I think probably one of the most valuable lessons that still resonates also today is that a great idea can be too early for the market. The timing is everything. And virtual clinical trials really came to be broadly accepted during the pandemic when people couldn't get to brick and mortar trial centers anymore. So that was almost 20 years after this great idea had originally been hatched. What I learned is that failures always are learning opportunities, and they have silver linings. And the best thing you can do is take those failures and use them to advance and to get you to the next level.
My following question: what would you have done differently at that situation? Wasn't it too early? Was that the real issue?
I think that was the biggest issue. So disruptive. It was so different from how people were used to thinking about clinical trials. The other thing is I was only fundraising on the West Coast, and I appreciate now that there is a lot of capital available for pharma-oriented solutions on the East Coast. I did that at the time. I was like immersed in Silicon Valley and, going to all the big names there. So I think that there is, being open to investors from other regions is another thing. I wish I had flown to Boston and New Jersey and New York and talked to investors there. The outcome might have been different. I think people today understand more about clinical trials. I think California has become a better place than it was 20 years ago for pharma tech investing. One of the things I guess I could have done differently, but didn't.
This is such a great learning, and I think that builds a very strong foundation for you too. So you founded Health Innovation Strategies and now lead PharmStars and PharmStars Ventures. What inspired you to create these organizations, and what makes their approach to healthcare innovation unique?
I should tell you a little bit more about my
Yes.
origin story. After my PhD, I got involved with the first startup, as I mentioned, in Kendall Square, and then moved to California, got involved with a company being spun out of Stanford School of Medicine, found my passion in what we used to call e-health, digital health. And then I went on to work for a variety of early stage healthcare startups, including 1747, some venture capitalists, got involved, was hired actually to be the first vice president of innovation and advanced technology at Kaiser Permanente. That's why I started to think about and was responsible for organizational innovation, how to bring innovation into big organizations. And at Kaiser, we had a team that was identifying emerging technologies outside of Kaiser, evaluating it and bringing it in. From Kaiser, I moved from my husband's job again to the East Coast and had the honor and privilege of becoming the first chief innovation officer at Boston Children's Hospital, where I built the innovation acceleration program there. Our mission was to really enhance the innovation culture, and so to help doctors and nurses test and develop new ideas. I was actually recruited from Boston Children's Hospital to come to Biogen, and they asked me to become the vice president of innovation, lead their innovation beyond the molecule strategy. And I thought, cool, I've been in healthcare for a while now. This will be an easy transition. I don't have to move again. I'm very excited about that. When I got to Biogen, I was actually in for a bit of a rude surprise. It turns out when I got there, I couldn't understand what people were saying. I didn't understand the language that was being spoken. I didn't understand how the company was organized. I didn't even understand all the things my group was doing. And it was really a very steep learning curve, Vasa, to understand how pharma worked. And it made me appreciate how opaque pharma can be to people coming from the outside or trying to work with them from the outside. So that was like really a learning lesson for me. The other thing, though, that really imprinted on me from my time at Biogen and that I took forward to health innovation strategies was the tremendous potential for digital to transform pharma. And I mean at every stage, from drug discovery through development to marketing and commercialization to beyond the molecule patient solutions. There is a need for digital innovation at every one of these steps within pharma. So I became very passionate about this. That's why I set up health innovation strategies to advise large pharmaceutical companies on their digital health strategy. And FASA, I had what I would call sort of my second aha moment when I was advising one of these large pharma companies on their digital health strategy. They had asked for a particular type of innovation, and I found a startup that had developed that type of solution. I was very pleased with this, and I got everyone together in a physical room back when we still did that all the time. And we had a meeting. And everyone started talking, and it became clear to me a little bit into the meeting that this meeting was actually not going very well, that the pharma company and the startup folks were talking, but there was no connection. They were like talking past each other. And I realize now that what I was watching or experiencing at that moment was the pharma startup gap, the fundamentally different way that digital health or tech startups and pharma or biotech companies do business. And they operate in fundamentally sort of different universes, having to do with different culture, different type of product they develop, different language, different speed, appetite for risk. There are many things that cause the pharma startup gap, but a recognition that there was this gap, this problem in the market, one that I had sat in and experienced firsthand, was what inspired me to actually build PharmStars, which is the only Accelerator focused on bridging the pharma startup gap. And the PharmStars venture, which, as I mentioned, we started a couple years later, that's really focused on funding and bridging the pharma startup gap.
What exactly were those dialogues between the health tech and the pharma that was like essentially could have been Greek and Swahili, for example?
So they were speaking different languages, and pharma was asking about using it in certain applications within their organization, in certain departments that the startup didn't know what they were talking about or what they meant. And so there wasn't clear understanding by the startup of what the goal was that the pharma company was seeking, who was going to be involved, what the process would look like. It basically was, as you said, it was like Greek, and it's very hard. And I've talked to many startups since then that have been in this situation. They say, it's just, we don't understand what they're talking about. We don't understand their language. We're not sure why they want to do this. I had one startup that said, well, pharma asked to use our product, and we said, of course, but we don't really understand how they're using it or what they want it for. This is a theme that comes up over and over again. It's very hard for startups to understand pharma. I would also say that for folks that have only worked in big pharma, they don't understand a lot of things about startups, about how quickly they move, about the risks they're taking, about the fact that they're in really a different legal and regulatory environment, and that they can build a product quickly. Think about the fact that a digital health startup can build a product weeks, months, maybe a year, and months, maybe a year, and continue to iterate and change and come out with new versions. Whereas a pharma company spends 14 years bringing one molecule to market. Hopefully it gets approved, and then they definitely don't change it. They just sell it as is until they run out the patent. And so there's just so little that these two groups have in common, and yet they need each other. There's so much synergy that comes from pharma being able to partner with startups and startups being able to partner with big pharma. And the patient is also a big winner in all of these partnerships, but it just doesn't happen easily. There's so much that's needed, to really bridge that pharma startup gap.
About PharmStars and Farm Ventures specifically, why do you do what you do? And what is the unique thing that you bring to the pharma and the health tech? What is essentially what drives you, and what is the problem we are solving here?
Well, I'm really passionate about bridging the pharma startup gap and helping digital health startups and big pharma partner for both of their benefits and ultimately to help the patient. And so what we've done with PharmStars is create a program that we call Pharma University. And we basically bring in 10 startups at a time through a very rigorous application process to our program. And these startups go through Pharma University, which involves, first of all, coming to class and actually learning about pharma. What does it do? How is it organized? What is the work that gets done? What are the regulatory rules? Basically, everything the startup needs to know about pharma, we teach them through a series of 3 hours a week of classes. It's everything I wish I had known when I was at Biogen. So we teach startups about pharma. The other very important component of Pharma University is that we have mentors who coach the startups on applying all of the information that they're learning about the pharma industry to their business model, with the goal of developing a clear pharma value proposition to be able to clearly articulate what it is that they offer and what pharma problem they solve. Pharma University is focused on helping startups become good partners and position themselves to sell their products effectively to pharma. And the program culminates with a showcase event, which is part of our Pharma Tech Summit, at which the startups actually present to our pharma members, and then they sit down with one-on-one meetings. And we recognize that the pharma startup gap has two sides to it. So our PharmStars doesn't just focus on startups, it also focuses on pharma companies, our pharma members. These are forward-looking pharma and biopharma companies that want to engage digital health startups and utilize and take advantage of their innovation. And so they become members of PharmStars in order to have priority access to these startups and to be part of a community of learners that want to discuss how digital innovation can transform the pharma industry. So at this point, we've had 91 startups come through the 8 cohorts that we run. We run 2 cohorts a year. Our metric for success, as I've mentioned, is deals done. So the first 35 startups to graduate from our program have done more than 98 deals at this point, 98 and counting. We also see that our startups do really well, not just getting clients, but winning prizes. When you learn how to sell your product, the money follows, and our startups now have collectively raised more than $900 million. And so it was seeing all this success, Fasa, that was the reason that we wanted to start PharmStars Ventures. We wanted to capture a piece of these startups as they accelerate, as they grow. And so that's why we're now running a fund that invests in PharmStars graduates. And as I mentioned, we did some modeling to see if we'd had the fund from the beginning, how would we have done? And the returns were great. So about the Accelerator and what it does for startups and pharma, and now the fund and its ability to further support these startups.
91 startups in how long?
In the last 4 years. We do 2 cohorts a year.
Okay.
We've been running for 4 years. We're starting our 9th cohort right now.
Okay.
By November, we'll be over the 100 startup mark.
Oh,
So
my.
pretty exciting.
Equal number of startups in all cohorts, or it's been increasing
Yeah,
over time?
we aim for about 10. We've had some 11, some we've had 12. I think we had one was 13. So our goal is 10. Sometimes we don't stick to our goal.
This is phenomenal. And what is the unique thing about,
So
not
what's
about the
really
startup, but about
about
PharmStars?
the
And yeah,
Accelerator,
what is your competition? Like, what is it? What is that
what's
really unique thing that you offer?
What's unique is we are the only accelerator focused on bridging the pharma startup gap together with pharma in a structured way, providing the education that startups need to understand pharma and building that trust relationship, because that's what really is important. Pharma companies get to know the startups through our program. The startups get to know the pharma through our program. And the startups learn to speak pharma. It's like getting an MBA in pharma, basically. So our Pharma University program is quite unique. And actually, it's so unique and so comprehensive and useful that some of our pharma members have now come to us and asked us if they can put their folks through Pharma University, because they also want to learn the ins and outs of what is an incredibly complicated industry.
Wonderful. What is that one win that comes to your mind when you say, like, when this is what I did?
The startups work really hard in our program to develop a new pharma-focused investor pitch. And after they present at the showcase, they are so proud of themselves. And the pharma companies are so impressed. We consistently hear that these startups are unbelievably clear and well-prepared and articulate and have such interesting innovation. And there's just that feeling of bringing people together and helping to facilitate these groups doing business together is probably the thing that I find most gratifying and is, I think, a huge win, if not the biggest win.
The ending when they present and feel proud of themselves. And this looks very good. You did share a challenge that you had early on in your career, but what kind of challenges do you face right now in your organization? Or this can be a two-part question, or the challenges that the health tech face as we go forward. Either way, what is the biggest challenge? Like, you can address both or one of the two.
So, in thinking about the challenge of the adoption of technology within pharma, and this is true though also on the provider side, I think that the biggest challenge has to do with change and disruption and workflow. So I think when you have a new technology that you want to introduce into pharma, it's hard to get them to stop doing things the old-fashioned way, if you will. It's hard to get pharma folks to take risks. They're a very risk-averse, risk-minimizing industry. The goal at every stage when you develop drugs is to minimize the risk to patients, to make sure that the drug is as safe as possible, to make sure your clinical trial is successful, that you get FDA approval. You're on a very clear path. And so I think it's hard for pharma and folks in pharma often to step back and say, we want to keep minimizing risk, but here's an innovation that might allow us to do things more quickly or more efficiently or save money or help the patient sooner. And so I think that stopping to do things the way you've been doing and making a change is a fundamental challenge that almost every startup that approaches pharma faces. No matter how much money they're going to save or how much time they're going to save, you still have to have someone who's willing to say, I'll take that risk. I'll give it a try. And I think that's one of the hardest things in terms of bringing innovation into the pharmaceutical industry in terms of digital and tech innovation.
When you spoke about this, because the health startup is coming from a position where they're all about change, and then you have this pharma that is completely opposite about not change. So if you want them to change, they have to go through two steps that you have to stop doing what you're doing, then do something else. And there is like somebody is coming this fast and somebody is doing something normally, then you have to stop and change the direction is just, I can see the problem so clearly. It is a two-step process for one
Yeah.
team, one step where the other team is already there. So how do you, how do you
How
both of
does this
them?
actually work?
Yeah.
So, working with us in PharmStars, we have champions from our pharma members, folks that are interested and see the potential for digital innovation and are often tasked with, the remit is find digital innovation. So they help to be that bridge between the business folks that are doing things as usual within pharma and these very innovative startups. But it's not enough just to have a person. You actually have to build a relationship and you have to have trust. That pharma champion certainly has to have a relationship within their organization, people that trust them to find good ideas. But then that champion also has to have a relationship and trust that the startup is going to be good to work with, that they can rely on them, that they'll deliver what they've promised, that the technology works as described. And it's that relationship and that type of trust that we help build in our accelerator by introducing the champions to the startups, by having the startups study the companies, by a variety of things. I don't want to go into all this now, but we believe that relationships are the key to successful innovation within pharma, and relationships rely on trust. And that's how we approach bringing these otherwise very difficult land innovations into these busy, big, traditionally conservative organizations.
Especially a behemoth is walking in one direction and all that inertia. And why would they
Yes.
stop if they don't trust you? Why would they stop and listen to you? They'll just keep moving. That's amazing. How do you foster innovation cultures within highly regulated risk-averse healthcare environments? I believe it is the trust that you build. And can you double click on that? What exactly did you do to build that particular trust? Is it time is a factor, referrals is a factor, or just speaking their language is a factor, or a combination of all three?
So startups need to certainly speak the language. I think that's the number one thing. They first of all have to understand the questions that are being asked. So you have to speak their language, understand their questions. You have to use their language also. There's certain terms that pharma use, and when you use them, they understand that you understand them. You also have to be aware of the pressures and the um, environment that pharma is operating in. There are a variety of data privacy and security regulations that pharma has to adhere to. As an example, GDPR, where a startup might not, be working in Europe and doesn't worry about GDPR, but pharma is going to comply with GDPR because a big pharma company is global, and so they're going to expect the startup then to also comply with those regulations. So there's a whole group of data privacy and security regulations that you have to be aware of. If you indicate that you don't understand this, or you're cavalier, or you aren't careful with data, you're going to lose the trust of your pharma partner. Similarly, there's a lot of rules and regulations that pharma complies with around engaging with doctors and providers and how they can engage and what they can say to them. There's the sunshine laws and all sorts of transparency rules. And again, if a startup indicates that they're not aware of these rules or violates these rules that may not apply to them but do apply to pharma, this will be very off-putting, and this will not build trust. In fact, it will have the opposite relationships. There's so many things that a startup needs to understand about how pharma is doing business and why they are doing business that way in order to be a good partner. And again, these are the types of things that we spend 10 weeks in this Pharma University boot camp teaching the startups so that they can show up and successfully navigate the process and build a successful relationship.
It's the language. Wow. So we will change gears a little bit and get into the future, what it looks like, and advice for people, leaders, and innovators. Given your vantage point at the intersection of technology, pharma, healthcare delivery, what trends or shifts excite you most about the next decade?
I'm very excited about the potential that technology can actually speed the time it takes to bring these drugs to market. There's so much need, there's so many conditions, there's rare disease. There's so many patients out there that would benefit from pharmaceutical solutions. And there's more and more technology now that's being built to help pharma, whether it's to support and monitor and deliver care to patients or to help with clinical trial recruitment or drug discovery. There's so much technology out there. And what I'm excited about and what I think we're going to see, what is an important trend, is that pharma is really beginning to embrace these digital tools. Not all the tools yet, and certainly not all the pharma yet, and not in every possible way. But there are leading pharmaceutical companies, there are bold, innovative pharma companies that are saying, we know our drug development process is slow. We know we want it to be faster. We know that startups can help us with that. We know that startups can help us engage patients better. We know that startups can help us utilize all the data that we have in more effective ways and bring us new data that we don't even know that we need. We want to work with startups. This trend of starting to see more pharma companies say yes to digital health innovation is really exciting. And I think it is the wave of the future. And I think that it's also going to differentiate which pharma succeed in the long run and which don't. I think before long, it will be critical to have a digital health strategy. It will be critical to be leveraging digital innovation to be a successful pharma. And I think it's just a matter of time until we see that digital health is a differentiator between successful pharmaceutical companies and other ones.
The next question is, I think I have an inkling what is going to be the number one point, but still wanted to go beyond the one point and double click on the second and the third point as well as a part of your advice. What advice would you give to the entrepreneurs who are getting into this field and the leaders who are getting into this field? And what are those 3 points that you said, hey, do this, do this, do this. This is going to be the table stakes for you to go.
So I think we've already talked about the importance of relationships. Let me give a few other points. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to boil a 10-week program down into, I guess, first of all, make sure this is to the entrepreneurs that you are solving a real problem. And that real problem, you have to be able to articulate for pharma. So pharma has to have a problem and you need to solve that problem. As you're solving that problem, you need to be attuned to the implications that change and using your solution may have for pharma, for the end user. I think another way of talking about focusing on real problems is to be able to clearly articulate your pharma value proposition. So focus on real problems, articulate your value proposition, and understand the implications. I think those are my 3 points. And then I'd say one more just general point, be patient. Things move slowly in pharma. So be it at startup speed, it's going to be at pharma speed, and they're very different.
This is coming from a philosophical and a guiding principle, and it could go in multiple directions. For example, it could go for me at the end, it is people who are delivering care and people who are receiving care. That should be our ultimate focus, even though we operate. Those are the 2 stakeholders who should benefit the most. So that's my kind of a guiding principle. So for the leaders and the entrepreneurs, from your perspective, what do you think should be the guiding principle and the details of that guiding principle?
I probably would say I have a similar guiding principle, but maybe one more element before it. So I really believe that technology will be transformative and it cannot be ignored. And it's going to bring huge change and disruption, but it will improve clinical outcomes. It can reduce costs. And technology can deliver care in fundamentally new ways and help patients live longer, better, happier lives, healthier lives. My guiding principle is that technology can be transformative. I think that the corollary or the additional point is at the end of the day, and I think you were sort of saying this, Fasa, healthcare is still a very human experience, and it still comes down to patients and their needs and their experience. And that's what ultimately determines the success or failure of any new innovations. Technology alone is not enough. You have to always remember the end user, the patient, and the people that are involved.
As we come to the end of this podcast recording. Wrap up, Naomi, you have 90 seconds, but you can take as long as you want to share anything that I might have missed through my questions, or if you want to reiterate anything that you deem very important that you want the audience to hear. Essentially, the question is yours, the answer is yours, and the stage is yours.
Thank you. I guess I just would say again that we've built a very successful accelerator through PharmStars, and we have seen our 91 startups go on to phenomenal business success, selling to pharma, raising money, winning prizes. And so this has led us to basically try to build, and we're currently building the PharmStars Venture Fund, which is an opportunity to invest in digital health startups. And the structure of the fund is that every startup that graduates gets a cash investment from the fund. And then for select high growth startups, there'll be follow-on funding. And so this is an opportunity for us to further support the pharma tech world. Over the course of the next 4 years, we expect to invest in 100 digital health startups. What's exciting about these is they're actually very diverse. They range in stage because our accelerator is not limited to one particular stage, but covers pre-seed, seed, Series A, and even Series B companies. We work with a variety of startups from around the world because we're a virtual accelerator. So we have startups. The best innovation comes from countries all over the world. And we have technology that is going to help transform pharma, but many of these solutions are med tech and other devices and other types of software that are already in use by providers. So we're super excited about the potential for PharmStars Venture Fund to grow and support the critical digital health pharma tech ecosystem.
And that's phenomenal. With that, Naomi, I think we might have to have a part 2 for this because there's a lot of things that we can dig into.
Fasa, I just want to say thank you so much for hosting me today. It's been really a pleasure to be in discussion with you. You've asked great questions, and I love that you have this podcast. And thank you for having me today.
And it has been 100% my pleasure, Naomi. It was so educational. Thank you.